This is a special study session of the Wayne Westland Community School District Board of Education. It is Monday, June 6th. It is 5 o'clock. I would like to welcome each of you this evening to our study session. Before we begin, I need everybody to understand that there is a difference between a regular board meeting and a study session, just in case you are not familiar with the concept. A study session means that we will be presented information as a school board, and we will not be voting at this meeting. We are just taking in information. Trustees will be encouraged to ask questions about what they see in the presentation. If you have picked up a copy of the agenda, which is on the table on the other side of this wall, you will notice that there are two places for citizens' comments, one before we get into the redesign discussion and one afterwards. The first one is designed for agenda items only, and since there's only one agenda item on today, it shouldn't be too hard. And then comments after the presentation. It is your choice as to when you speak, just make sure it is at that point in the agenda. With that said, Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Albrecht.
I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Attendance, Dr. Weaver.
Mrs. Hines.
Here.
Mr. Buckaloo.
Here.
Mr. Griffith.
Here.
I am here, Madam Vice President.
I am here also.
All right, let the record reflect that 5 of us are here and 2 are excused.
Our first item up is 16. Citizens' comments, agenda items only, please. Yes, ma'am. Please, could you step up to the podium, and that way we will be able to all hear you, and it will be picked up by the taping device.
It's in reference to Closing Kingdom. I worked there, and we were told we had two years, and it's only been a year, and all of a sudden we're told we might be closing down. I don't think it's fair to the staff at the school, to the students. It's just not fair to all of a sudden just up and tell everybody, hey, I'm sorry, but you got to find somewhere to go. That's all I have to say.
Would you care to identify who you are?
Oh, I'm Diane Gordon, but I'm called Grandma D at the school. I'm their cook.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak at this time? All right, seeing nobody, we will move on to the next item on the agenda. 27216, Tinkham Redesign Study Session.
Thank you, Vice President Medell. I'm going to introduce some comments before we get started. And again, because this is a study session, we've got a lot of information to share. So throughout that sharing, please, we'll stop and kind of pause and let you digest it in chunks. You do the same. Wave your hand if you have a question. We'll try and make sure to give you ample time to do that rather than holding it all till the end like a presentation would be, because there's a lot of information we'll be sharing. So I want to start off just by simply sharing that school finance certainly has created the difficult situation that we're facing today, as well as the difficult financial situation of most school districts within Michigan. Effective in 2011-12, that school year, as well as again the following school year, 12-13, Wayne Westland experienced a $944 per pupil reduction in revenue. That was a combination of both the state's reduction at that time as well as the loss of the Wayne Westland language. That amounts to approximately $12 million in lost revenue to the district. The district had already closed schools by that time, so largely the brunt of this was bore on the backs of our employees through the concessions that they made. Since that time, while the governor continues to report that he has increased revenues for schools, his increases have largely served the state's required retirement system. Wayne Westland's dollars for day-to-day operations have continued to remain flat since about 12-13. As such, we are examining every program and service. We do very good and important work, and nobody looks to making these types of reductions because they certainly are about services we provide, and they have an impact both on the population we serve as well as our employees. Tonight is no different. We recognize that our proposal does reduce a service, particularly adult education, if you were to approve it later on in the next board meeting. The reasons we're recommending the changes in the Tinkham proposal are because we have a finite amount of dollars, and we actually are in a position of having to prioritize the services we are going to offer. And our main focus being primarily those that focus on our K-12 population. So we must ensure that we have the resources to do that. And you also know that we want to make sure we have the resources to compensate our employees at a competitive wage and try and curb some of the turnover that we've experienced over the last few years and continue to deal with. So while the proposal is unfortunate, it's certainly necessary at this time. And I'm going to turn it over to John Albrecht to start with some of the detailed information we'd like to share with you, and we'll take some moments of pause throughout the presentation for your questions or conversation or clarity. So John, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Harmon, Madam Vice President, members of the Board of Education. As I go through this presentation, from time to time you may have questions and other of my colleagues may have comments. So we'll talk about some background of why we are exploring moving programming from Tinkham's campus and discontinuing adult education and evening programming. 3 factors prompted that work. The redesign of the alternative high school program in the spring of 2015, with the expectation that that program would support itself with the state's foundation allowance while serving a specific demographic. In other words, those who had not experienced success in a traditional setting. The needs of the Tinkham facility are pressing and continue to be a concern. And finally, we had embarked on evaluating programs across the district. So I'll be talking about different types of people who are enrolled in these programs. Pupil refers to a person that we all think of when we talk about our kids. A participant is someone over the age of 19 and no longer considered a K-12 student. So with that in mind, number 1, we have pupils under the age of 20 enrolled in all of our schools. But for this discussion, specifically in the redesigned alternative high school. Number 2, we have pupils currently enrolled in adult education at Tinkham. Again, those are students or people under the age of 20. 3, we have participants. Those are people over the age of 19, but are enrolled in high school completion classes at Tinkham Adult Education Program. 4th, we have participants over the age of 19 again, who are enrolled in ESL or GED classes at Tinkham Adult Ed. And finally, we have participants enrolled in CTE programming and taking high school completion courses. I don't need it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Albrecht, could you explain to the audience the acronyms that we use in education?
Okay. ESL, English as a Second Language student, GED, General Education Diploma.
And CTE is?
And CTE is Career and Tech Ed
Okay.
at William D. Ford Career and Technical Center. Thank you. So again, pupils are those that are 16 to 19 years of age for this discussion. Our redesign plan was that we would provide programming for our pupils, those under the age of 20, within the alternative high school. There is a duplication of programs. The same demographic is being served. All of our pupils will be migrating to the alternative high school setting. Our current state.
John, yeah.
Go ahead.
Mr. Albrecht, I do understand that a participant in career tech has to also be working on a high school completion. I'm just not sure why. Is that a federal or state regulation?
It's a state regulation. Funding is tied to a high school completion component.
So those two are married together and there's no way to separate them?
Not at this time, no.
Well, with the exception of the person can pay tuition.
That's true.
So if they're in it for high school completion, it's at no charge to the person attending. That's why they're called a participant. If they choose to pay tuition, you can attend, but that's completely at the person attending's own cost. They are not called a participant at that point.
So a non-high school grad wishing to pay when Westland can attend career tech.
Paying a tuition. Yep. And we'll get to some of that later.
Thank you.
Are we gonna, excuse me, through the chair,
Yep.
I get a follow-up. Are we gonna get to the comparisons and costs on that tuition later? If we
Yeah.
are, I'll forego the question.
Yeah.
All right, fine.
So our current state, and for each of these bullets, there will be slides or a slide or slides to explain each of them. Number one, the cost of expected repairs to the facility at Tinkham approach $2 million. There are two programs in the same facility, adult ed and an alternative high school, and both have pupils. Those are the people under the age of 20. The redesigned alternative high school program for pupils renders adult ed programming duplicative. Running participant programming, that's for people over the age of 19, for high school completion, for 15 participants is inefficient, and we attain few graduates. GED and ESL enrollments have been steady and should continue. The general fund supports programs that serve small number of pupils, those under the age of 20, or are duplicated. That amounts to $110,000 of pupil foundation allowance, approximately $36,000 from career tech, and $74,000 from adult ed would be reallocated to the K-12 program. Running adult programming at the Career Tech Ed Center requiring high school completion component is costly, and we attain few, if any, high school completers. And then finally, we'll talk about the cost of the operations.
Sir?
I'm sorry. Remember what I said before? Yeah, not a problem. At the end of the presentation, when I get to that part, you can ask, write it down so you don't forget. Okay.
As you recall, the infrastructure at Tinkham has been a concern for quite some time. Tinkham is the sister school to Wildwood. The estimated costs of $2 million for immediate needs include roof, an HVAC system, and a boiler replacement.
I'd just add a little bit here. We just recently updated Wildwood, and we did geothermal. That was over $2 million. Roof replacement, you know, this could easily go over $2 million, and it's a pretty immediate need.
Madam Vice President, if I could just ask, since we're talking about HVAC, could somebody turn the air conditioning on in here?
Okay.
Cheryl's
I'd appreciate
got
that.
it. Yep.
Thank you, Cheryl.
I do have a question about the facilities. How much of it is being occupied and used?
At Tinkham right now?
Yes.
Pretty much all of it. There
Even
may
the
be
ba- even the
one
back hall?
There may be one or two rooms that don't have a specific use other than storage.
Okay. All right.
So to talk about the two programs again, and pupils under the age of 20, we did allow some pupils who are already in the adult ed program to continue there for an additional year. Next fall, any remaining pupils will be enrolled in the alternative high school as a result of that redesign of the spring of 2015. Note in the slide, on the left-hand side, the alternative high school in 14-15 had 67 pupils. This year, in 2015-16, there were 137 as of January. On the adult education side of this slide, in 2014-15, there were 125 pupils, and there are currently active 62 pupils in the 2015-16 year. Again, I remind you, the pupils, those are students under the age of 20, will be moving to the alternative high school after this year. The limited participant program in adult ed at Tinkham, there are 91 participants have graduated over the last 6 years, or about 15 per year. Current state is there are 19 participants, those are people over the age of 19, in the high school completion program. 6 or 7 of those graduated on Friday. One participant needs 2 quarters to earn her diploma. 3 need a year, 2 need 2 years, and 6 need 3 or 4 years. We would like to find an accommodation for that person who needs 2 quarters. And we are ready to provide that coursework either through online programming or in-class work within the alternative high school at our cost. Others could seek programming at the Wayne County Community College District, Southgate Adult and Community Education, Starkweather in Plymouth, or other community college programs. For consideration, participants, those over the age of 19, programming at Tinkham, and the evening programming at Career Tech. There were 188 registered for the fall of 2015 at Tinkham, and the current enrollment, active enrollment, is 80, and 63 of them are in either GED or ESL, which we are recommending continuation. The average graduates annually, again, are 12 to 15 people, and a class size of participants only would be about 4. In the evening CTE program, there were 336 enrolled before the school year started, and there are currently 176 active. The evening CTE program drops just over 50%, and high school completion rates for CTE participants, again, I keep reminding you, participants are over the age of 19, are close to 0.
Excuse me, I just have one quick question. Is there like a reason, why did we do like any surveys to see why people aren't completing the classes? Was there anything done to find out what's happening? Why there's such a huge drop-off?
Typically, they drop before, and I'm actually going to have a slide a little bit later. They actually don't even attend the first day of school.
Okay, thank you.
Now, this slide may take a few minutes, and I certainly want to be able to make sure everyone understands. The slide contains 2 pieces of information. There are multiple columns, though. And it's about pupils, those that are under the age of 20, and participants over the age of 19, and it's the graduation data. You notice in the far left-hand column, there are a January and June date for each year, so because there are people that complete their work at 2 different times during the year. But I wanted to use the data and show it to you when it occurs. The second column includes pupils who have graduated from the adult ed program. Those are, again, people under the age of 20, over the last 6 years, and you'll note at the bottom the total of those is 200. Those people will graduate in the future from the alternative high school should we make this change. The third column are the actual participants that I spoke of that have graduated over the last 6 years. You'll note there are 91 of those. The last column is there to show you those are graduates who did not complete their high school work at one of our high schools, and then in the next 2 semesters subsequently earned their diploma by going to the alternative high school. So for instance, in 2006, this year in 2016, there were 6 from John Glenn Way Memorial in January and 7 from Tinkham in June that completed their work 4.5 or 5 years after they became a student at the high school. In the second column, the Tinkham adult ed pupils, those under the age of 20, all of those graduates had dropped out of school elsewhere, and their graduation credit went back to whatever high school they left from before. So all the total pupils at the bottom, 286, will all have earned their diploma from the alternative high school in the future.
All right, let me understand. So we're taking in students from other school districts, correct?
That is correct.
And we've been doing it right along, as
That
far
is correct.
as I'm aware. As they've dropped off their programs, we've picked up a few here and there.
That is correct.
All right. And when they graduate, this, we don't get credit for our paperwork that has to go to the state. It goes on their sending school district?
That is correct.
Okay. Do they show up on ours as dropped?
So our own students, John Glenn Way Memorial Tinkham students that complete there, we get district credit back at their high school once they've completed the work. So the same would be true for the ones who are not our students. They would get their credit back at the high school that they dropped out of.
Right, but what I'm asking
I'm
is,
sorry.
the student that we have educated on our rolls, we can't count them towards our graduation rate. They can, but does it show as a drop for us then?
That is correct, with one possible exception, and that is if they enrolled in high school with us.
Okay. Became a student of school of choice
That is correct.
type, okay.
So the pupil foundation costs for high school completion, the dollars referenced here are generated by partial enrollments. These dollars would be reallocated to the K-12 program as these pupils move into the alternative high school program, further helping the alternative high school program to be supported purely by the state foundation allowance. So the pupil foundation allowance that we have now is $7,391 for each one FTE. And that's channeled into adult education for pupils, those under the age of 20, enrolled in both adult ed and career tech. That amount approximates $36,000 for career tech and $74,000 for adult ed. Now, let me tell you about, I'll be a little bit specific here about why there's pupil money going to career tech. Career tech is not a high school, and students do not earn a diploma there. So we enroll them in the alternative high school where they can earn a diploma, and we get the full foundation allowance, or at least a partial foundation allowance based on how many classes they take, and then that money is funneled to the career tech program to defray costs. That's why that happens. GED and ESL enrollments. Currently, there are 63 active GED, ESL participants in the Tinkham Adult Program. Those are people over the age of 19. There are 4 classes of GED and 1 ESL. These are participants funded for the program with Section 107 funding. That's adult education funding. Infrastructure needs for this program are minimal, and relocation should be easy to facilitate.
What do you mean by relocation?
If we were to close the Tinkham facility, we'd have to find another classroom to put that program into.
In our district,
In our district,
not another district?
correct. There are communities that run GED programs, and they might run it in a community facility or whatever. We just haven't finalized that yet.
Okay. I also had a question. The section 104 funding. that's-
107?
I'm sorry, 107.
It's okay.
I almost said 504. Too many numbers, too many alphabet letters at this time. That comes through RISA, correct?
It does. Actually, so there are 10 what they call prosperity regions in the state of Michigan. Southeast Michigan has 3 counties,
Right.
Macomb, Oakland, and Wayne, that are in a prosperity region together, and RISA is the entity that takes care of that.
He knows
What?
he knows what I'm going to ask.
Yeah, fiscal agent.
All right.
Let me use his term. You can speak up. Here's the microphone.
Too much of a commitment. It's my understanding that we used to receive this money directly from the state, and we
That's
no
correct.
longer, it now goes through RISA, which I'm sure probably takes off some administrative costs
It's
for,
about 15% of administrative costs, yes, off the top.
really? Okay. So we're not being reimbursed per student
No.
fully?
No.
Okay.
So the CTE evening program continued. As I said earlier, the opening registrations for the fall of 2015 was 336. When classes started, there were 277. On count day, the first week in October, there were 229. And at the end of the first semester, 185. We opened the second semester with a few enrollees, was back up to 231. On count day, it had dropped to 211. By the end of the semester, and this is actually Friday's count when I ran the report, was 176. This is inclusive of pupils, those under the age of 20, participants, those over the age of 19, MRS clients, which is Michigan Rehabilitative Services, people who they send to Career Tech Center, and tuition-paying people. This has been our typical experience. In making ends meet, losing 107 participants by count day just isn't possible. We need to recruit and enroll approximately 340 people in order for the program to even break even.
And John, if I could clarify, there was conversation last time about could we recruit more students for adult education, which, remember, we shared the funding for adult education is capped. So we're sort of talking about two different issues when we talk about career tech ed, because it includes a variety of types of people attending. Adult education is funded through Section 107. That's the funding that gets capped. So recruiting more people wouldn't help you to gain more funding. And I think Steve could talk for many days about the work they've done to, number one, get to the 336 that register, but then on top of that, keeping them in terms of the way we've promoted the program. So there's not much more they can do to promote the program. It gets promoted a lot. People they say they're going to attend, they intend to attend, and then don't attend.
Mr. Albrecht, if I'm getting my figures correct here, and I'm not taking into consideration the 15%, so they're not going to be right, but 107 students equals about $790,000.
No, it's a different funding rate. It's $2,850 per
2,800.
student. And then that's broken down by the number of course hours or class hours that they take.
Okay, thank you.
So the FTE is very small for each person attending because the number of hours they attend is very small.
And at that point, at the beginning of when we've registered the students, that's what we've staffed at,
Yes.
That is
in
correct.
anticipation that they will all show up, or do we staff it like 80% of that number will show up, or?
To be totally honest, we could certainly serve them, but we know, our experience has been they drop off considerably, and so our staffing is based on what our experience is, but certainly we could serve the students who register.
Okay. But at the point, I guess what I'm getting at, or maybe I'm on the wrong track, that by the time we get to the end of the first semester, we've lost more than half of our students that we've staffed for.
Yes.
We typically staff for 25 to 26 pupils during the day program.
Right.
In each section. So a little bit later in this, I'm going to talk about the actual numbers, and you'll see the difference then.
Okay.
So a little more on CTE evening program. It impacts Michigan Rehabilitative Services, the MRS clients. I'm going to use that term client because that's MRS term. MCTI, the Michigan Career and Technical Institute, is an option for them. MCTI participates in federal Pell Grant and federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant programs. The client and the State of Michigan and Federal Vocational Rehabilitation Program can share educational costs at MCTI. However, clients who are eligible for Michigan Rehabilitative Services or the Bureau of Services for Blind Person are not charged tuition, room, or board on that campus. In the past, Career Tech has filled a training void for adults with disabilities who did not qualify for college or technical training due to their disability. In the event of the closing of the Career Tech Center evening programs, MRS counselors are required to work with those clients to resolve next steps as they continue to prepare their clients for employment and independent living.
So those students will be taken care of should the program be closed.
That is their responsibility.
It's their
yes.
responsibility.
And about
Okay.
how many of those students do we get?
I'm actually going to ask,
Steve, would you go to the mic, though, so it gets picked up for everybody?
Steve Kay, Principal of Career Tech. We started about at 73, and then that changes as the year goes on with some of the placements, but about 73 MRS clients.
You mean as they're placed out in the workforce?
I'm sorry, say that
As
again.
they're placed out from the classroom out into the workforce?
No, not so much placed out into the workforce, just those that are coming for technical training at night, funded by MRS. So placement rates are much, much lower.
Okay.
Yeah.
so CTE evening continued. Discontinuing that program would impact participants funded with Section 107 based on high school completion component. Our career and technical day program is designed to augment K-12 students or pupils. As such, Section 107 is allocated at a low per participant rate, $2,850 versus the $73.91 we get for our regular pupils. Some options for these people include Dearborn Public Schools Adult Ed, ITT Technical Institute, MIAT, it's MIAT College of Technology, Focus Hope, Ross Medical Education, and New Horizons Computer Learning Center. The CTE evening program also impacts tuition payers.
Mr. Albrecht, if I could, so the alternatives that you just mentioned, the students would be able to take that amount of money with them to enroll in those or not?
In some of them, yes, and some not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. In the Dearborn Public Schools Adult Ed, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So the CTE evening program also impacts tuition payers. There are 45 tuition payers right now who are not MRS. Recent data indicates that significant difficulty in recruiting tuition paying participants. Those, again, are the people over the age of 19, and then collecting that tuition owed. Currently, 5 of those 45 have not paid. Very few of the participants ever take more than the required ELA or math course on which funding is based, and the coursework is incorporated as a means to a diploma or high school completion, but close to none of those go beyond that requirement.
Would you repeat, sir? 30 of the 35 tuition-paying students have not paid?
No, 5 of the 45.
5 of the 45, thank you.
So we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we talked about last time, cost of materials and labor for relocation. So initially, I believe that all of this labor would be done by our staff, and I had articulated to that to you in May. I subsequently have learned that that was inaccurate. So I put an asterisk next to any category on this slide which requires contracted work as part of the cost. All of these were rounded for presentation purposes, but are very close to the actual costs or bids. For example, the ceiling bid actual is $1,603. We rounded it to $1,600. The lighting bid actually is $8,228.33, and we had put that in originally as $8,500. So these are very close to what we told you in the beginning, but they're not actual. So we rounded it.
Is that for labor and material?
Yes.
Well, labor and materials that's the outside quoted cost. The internal cost is just materials.
Yes.
We have staff that are currently in those positions. You know, it's not a federal program, so these are costs, they're not
Prevailing wage.
prevailing wage. So it'd just be whatever is bid by a contractor.
All right. If I could. Are you done? My question is, okay, let's say we put a contingency fund on this for, would that be, in your estimation, I'll hold you, this 5 or 10% to complete this kind of work in-house? On the ones that are started?
The ones that are started are outside contractors. You know, that's what they bid, that's what they quoted us, and that's what the cost will be.
So-
There shouldn't be overruns on that.
Okay, so we're looking at maybe 5% at the max overrun on any of this stuff?
Yeah, max, I would say.
Could any of this stuff be covered under the sinking fund?
No.
Okay,
No, it's repair and maintenance.
thank you.
So I might just call attention to, ceiling work is going to be done by someone else. Floor tiles, we don't have people that do floor tiles. Carpet installation is done by other people. Running fiber to the respite center so that we have connectivity would be done by outside contractors. And then, of course, security and access control. On the Wayne Memorial High School, installing fire doors would be done by contractors. And to refinish the wood shop floor, once we had moved all of the wood shop equipment out, would be done by a contractor. So, but those are all, they all cover the bid and are just rounded. It makes it easier to look at.
One quick question too about the technology, will they have like computers and smart boards in the classroom as well? Was that additional cost on top of this? like
No,
the
it's not.
technology?
Those will all be taken out of Tinkham and reinstalled in the new facilities.
Okay, thank you.
They can all be repurposed.
Repurpose.
So the next couple slides, Kelly and I will share. So it's about the costs of the operations. And you will recall some of this from the last time. Facility costs, and these are attributable just to the building operating at Tinkham. Supplies are about $4,000. Utilities, $53,400. And maintenance, $20,000, totaling about $77,400. While originally we referred to these as savings, these are actually costs attributable to the facility when it is in its operation. I want to emphasize these are not savings. For instance, some supplies would move to where a program would be relocated. And for some time, utility usage could still occur at Tinkham. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kelly for the other part of this slide.
Thank you. The personnel costs reflect the current costs of the 18.4 FTEs that would be reduced if this recommendation is approved. In your board packet, there's a summary of those FTEs, but the total is 17.8. The difference, 0.6, is because of 2.3 non-affiliated positions that are identified in the board packet, but they're not actually in the total. And I wish I had a really good explanation for you about that, but it's just oversight on my part. So it's actually 18.4 FTEs. The actual savings from the reduction of the 18.4 may not be the amount reflected. It actually is going to vary depending on who the employee is that gets displaced. While we're eliminating positions, employees get displaced dictated by their specific collective bargaining agreement. So it may not be the same people who are displaced. So it's an estimate.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
And for the employees that are going to be displaced, are we going to try to find them alternative positions in the district to help them out?
Thank you for the segue to the next slide. This is the breakdown of the 18.4 reduction. That 18.4 is actually comprised of 36 different employees. So a lot of them work only the part-time position in the evening. In fact, 13 of the instructional employees, or 4.5 FTEs, work in our K-12 program during the day. 6 support staff totaling 5.2 FTE and 17 instructional employees totaling 8.7 FTEs would be displaced. But some of those displaced employees may choose to no longer work the evening hours. They may already have a primary job during the day. One I know is a retired teacher who has come back to help us. Other reductions could be absorbed through attrition. We do have retirements. And then there's also the opportunity for any displaced employee to apply for another open position, either in our district or in a neighboring district.
So beginning in the early fall, we began meeting to discuss adult ed programming and its viability. The early discussions were predicated upon significant concerns related to the preparedness of participants for the rigor of high school work. The amount of remediation being provided significantly impaired success in earning high school credit. This discussion was also predicated on the fact that the alternative high school was redesigned to serve the pupil demographic, those under the age of 20, in our community, and to do so utilizing the state's per pupil foundation. Because high school completion is a component of CT evening programming, we had to include this in our exploration as well. So we met with the Tinkham Alternative High School staff twice. We met with Wayne Memorial High School staff and administration because they would be impacted if this program were to move. We met with the Tinkham Alternative High School students. We wanted their input. We met with the Tinkham Adult Education staff twice. We met with CT Evening staff and administration, and finally, we updated the Board of Education as to our exploration in April. We made our formal proposal in May. And that concludes our
Thank you.
presentation.
Questions? No questions? I have one back on implications on staff. Mrs. Bowl.
Okay?
It's everything. Which one? All right, now it says 13 instructional employees, teaching staff, correct? Social worker?
No, that includes instructional paraprofessionals, teaching assistants, so anybody who attributes to the instructional program is identified in that category.
All right, 17 instructional employees displaced. There's no difference between that, it's just that you've segregated it out by FTEs, or?
It's broken down by those who work in the K-12 program during the day and are working, for example, at Career Tech in the evening, the 9 hours a week.
Okay.
Because they're not technically displaced, they're just going to not work really, really long days.
All right, and then support staff, that would include clerical, custodial, cafeteria.
Yes, and paraprofessional that works for classroom. Like there's a clerical para at Tinkham, 1.5
Okay.
clerical paras.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that list, again, if you want to look, is in your board agenda with all the detail there, too.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Albrecht, is my understanding correct, those students attending Career Tech, participants, there's no way that we can get adequate Section 107 funding to make that viable, given the fact that there's a cap on how much we can receive?
The best way for me to explain it to you is that Steve K. literally works the numbers almost daily, trying to make certain that the funding we get, both tuition and Section 107, is enough to actually cover expenses. And every single time we do that, we know that we're coming up short. We're actually losing money on the program. There just isn't enough. There isn't enough tuition payers or participants that even all the way to the cap that we can pay the bills and run the program continuously and not lose money. So taking into consideration there's a cap, there's an actual total number of participants and hours of instruction that they receive, that once we go over that, anything over the top of that is absorbed by the general fund. So they're only going to give us so much. So it isn't like we can increase the number of participants and we would end up with more funding.
So let me try a different, slightly different
Okay.
track. There's no practical way that this is going to pay for itself.
No, there's not.
Any other questions?
One of my concerns also was about the expenses of the relocating, and I know I've had a private meeting later on with further detail of understanding that some of this is more like a generalization, like the painting could be just the paint itself and not necessarily the labor, because we're going to have employees doing the painting. But on the alternative, one of my concerns is with what is going to be contracted out, it's my interpretation of the law that we must pay prevailing wages. So I'm concerned with where we stand on that part, regardless of the vote tonight, just how we're handling the process of prevailing wages. I guess what I more so need for myself is I need to be informed and shown legally how we're able to not pay prevailing wages.
Okay, you have to pay prevailing wage on federal projects. This is all local money that we're using, so prevailing wage does not apply. Sorry, I'm looking at you through the whole of the
Yeah.
thing there.
So we'd have to, if we're going to pull the legal language, we'll just have to bring it to you at a later point. but-
Because essentially, we're a nonprofit organization,
Right.
publicly funded.
But specifically, federal dollars require prevailing wage. Local dollars do not. I mean, we're funded through the
So
state. The
then-
state doesn't have a prevailing wage.
So then we would never need to pay prevailing wages?
Only if we are using federal dollars, we would have to pay prevailing wage.
Yeah, I just, on record, I do want that documentation
Sure.
in future,
Sure.
near future.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, I will go on to the next item, and thank you very much, by the way, for the presentation. 27316, Superintendent Report.
And I'll pass on that. I have my report, but I'll provide it in our 7 o'clock meeting.
Thank you. 27416, Citizens' Comments.
And just so you know, the last time you used the timer, it didn't run for the audience, so.
Right, it was, it disconnected itself,
Okay,
so
just wanna make
It
sure.
is showing correctly.
Yeah, we
Okay.
can see it. Yeah.
All right, let's start back over here.
Okay.
I need you to step up to the podium again. And that goes for anybody else. If you wouldn't mind stating your name so that if you have questions that we need to get back to you with, specific answers, then we can do that.
Okay, I'm back again. My name's Diane Gordon, and I would like to know if he has paper written out how much this thing's gonna cost instead of just taking his word. Because I have a son-in-law who's a builder, so I know pretty much how things run and how much they cost. So I'd just like to know if he has the estimates, exactly what it's going to cost from the people who are going to do the work. That's all I got to say.
Thank you.
Stephanie Nadeau, Student Council President, Adult Education side of Tinkham. I would like to know if we have more than one company who we have received bids from. If so, how many companies? And as she said, do we have the bids from all of these companies? Because I believe seeing bids from multiple companies may make us feel more comfortable in seeing where these numbers are coming from.
Thank you.
Marilyn Brewer Bertier, I'm the business and computer tech teacher at the Career Tech Center. The one slide that you showed a 50% drop rate for our students. I think that was misleading, possibly from registration date until the end of the semester. I know when you get down to the actual numbers, but the 50% from count day to the end of the semester, I think that our most recent semester, it was at 75% completion. So, and the other thing I had referred to, when I sent you guys the email prior to the first board meeting, I referred to our longstanding relationship with MRS training. The slide that Mr. Albrecht showed with alternative training at MCTI, I believe that's located in Battle Creek, and it's a residential facility.
It's located in Plainwell, Michigan.
Well, somewhere on the west side, I knew it was somewhere on the west side of the state, it's a residential facility. And then after the last board meeting, when you guys stated what items you were looking at, one of the things was how many students were close to completion. So I had our counselor look at those numbers, and we have, we have 1 and 2 year certificates of completion is what we have. So we had 34 students that need one more semester to complete a year, and 16 students that need another semester to complete 2 years.
Could you repeat those numbers, please?
34 students need one more semester for 1 year certificate of completion. 16 students need one more semester for a 2 year certificate of completion.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Furton. I'm the art teacher at Tinkham in the adult side. I know that it said that we've had about 15 pupils, or participants rather, graduating each year, but we also have a lot of pupils graduating each year. And we have several that are very close to getting their high school diploma right now. If we were able to continue for another semester or half a year, we would be able to push through quite a few students with their high school diplomas. One benefit of the adult program that the alternative doesn't offer is a part-time schedule. At the last meeting, I had mentioned that a lot of our students support their families or they are parents themselves. Some of our students that are the 16 to 19-year-olds, they are bringing in the paychecks to pay the bills at their parents' house. So this gives them the opportunity to support their families and finish their high school diplomas. Giving them that extra time would help them graduate and then move on to higher education or get training to move on and help their families even further. There was a couple questions that we had too about the move. We were wondering what the lunch at Wayne is going to look like for the alternative students. Is it going to be extra staff or an extra long lunch, or are the alternative students going to be allowed to eat lunch with the high schoolers? What about gym classes? How are they going to fit in? Are they going to be able to take gym classes with the Wayne Memorial students, or are they going to have separate gym classes, and how is that going to work into the schedule? Our current students don't pay parking permits. Are they going to have that extra fee to pay at Memorial? The students that we have in the adult program now, are they going to be allowed back into the alternative program at the high school? And will they get the option to have their IEPs reinstated? Because right now, currently, they've given up their IEPs. If we do continue for another semester or a half a year or a year, would we have more E2020 classes to offer to get our students through the program more quickly so that we're not costing the district as much money, but we're helping those students get through? What's going to happen to the building once it closes? Is it going to become an eyesore that gets vandalized for the neighborhood? What is GED and ESL and ABE going to look like? Are they just going to move to a community center? Are they going to be something that people are going to know about? Already, a lot of people don't know about Tinkham Adult Education. A lot of our students had been moved to the alternative program without being allowed to register at the adult side. And a lot of students last year, 2 years ago, thought that we were closing. So we've not had any advertising for our program. So that could be a reason that we've lost a lot of attendees.
Time has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Aldo Abate. I've been teaching English at Tinkham for 2 wonderful years.
Hang on one second.
Oh, sorry.
We're having some technical issues here.
Oh, sorry. Facebook.
Close out of the whole thing.
Status update.
Was
Is
that
that a
a
pizza? I'm sorry.
All right, where's, there it is. I'm looking for the,
Give it a like.
there we go.
Okay. So tonight, I just wanted to provide some food for thought regarding austerity measures such as the one being proposed tonight. And oftentimes, we kind of neglect to consider the long-term, big-picture consequences that these can carry. Typically, they can create more problems and end up costing more than they were trying to save in the first place. Look no further than the Flint water crisis for proof of that. Without a program such as our own, our students are kind of left with no opportunity to enter the workforce, and that can cause damage to the local economy, to the local community. So if the goal is to kind of really connect with the community, I don't think this is a really good way to do it. There has to be some other way. And some of the alternatives that have been mentioned are not really viable for our students. Like Starkweather, it's from 5:30 to 8 o'clock in the evening. Some of them are really far. Some of them you have to be enrolled in the training program as well. So, we kind of have to think about those things when we're making a decision like this one. And, I don't think that we should give up on our students, even if it seems, like a real struggle. I think that's what education is about. It's about people and not giving up on them and helping them in those situations. So.
Thank you.
Well, this time I don't have a speech to read from. My name's Jeff Holland. I spoke with you briefly last month. I'd just like to address a couple things that I think are kind of being put by the wayside, one of which being that inside of that 13.1 FTEs, you're talking about 5 full-time day teachers. I myself have been one for 20 years, now 21. The thing here I think we really need to focus on is time. When we heard about this redesign plan a little over a year ago, we panicked. And we were given assurance that, the 16 to 19-year-olds will not overlap with you, don't worry about it. And a little time would pass, something else alarming would happen, and we'd panic, and we would have somebody come in and reassure us again. This pattern continued all throughout the school year until we got to the point where we're told that the infrastructure is bad, we need to close down the schools, and it costs too much to do it. And while we're doing that, we're going to get rid of adult ed at the same time. It seemed like a convenient thing to do. If you refer to page 7 of Mr. Albrecht's demonstration, and you look at the differences between the enrollment for the schools, there's a very obvious reason for this. We don't have to go reaching. For the first time ever, counseling and registration took place, alternative and adult together. And anytime you had a pupil, 16, 19-year-old, who was prepared to enroll in adult ed, they would take a look at that pupil, decide if they're close to graduating or not, and if they were not, they would be put into alternative ed. So this could explain that change number dramatically. The other thing that's being pushed aside, we've got the 5 full-time teachers, like I said, and after 20 years of teaching, I make about $40,000 a year. Most of us make less than that. It seemed to me that was probably the prime reason why I felt pretty secure about our position. We had a lot of pupils. We were graduating a lot of students. I know we weren't getting as much money for adult ed throughout the state, and there's no denying that. But we were a bargain. I mean, the teachers just did not cost that much to employ. Whereas in alternative ed, being K-12, master's degrees mean something. They have 11 more steps, 10 more steps than we do. I should be making $80,000 just with a bachelor's degree right now, or close to it. So it seems like things were backwards here. You've taken one program's pupils to save another's that cost more money to run, and the ones who really, really need the help, the participants, good luck. So I think the timing is something you have to really think about here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Marilyn Bertera again. Mr. Bucklew, I think you had a question about the participant funding, the cap on participant funding. And I just want to make it clear, I think about 50% of our funding comes from tuition payers, correct, Steve? Isn't it about 50-50, that income statement you showed me? That's about what it was. 50% tuition payers, 50% participant.
Thank you.
Hello all. I have a few questions about construction and other statements, but construction, first of all, you can't install fire doors in the middle of the hallway to separate Wayne Memorial from Tinkin students without having permits. Architect, where's the cost on that? We discussed this last month, haven't seen those. You're going to have to update the fire suppression. You just can't put a wall up and not have adequate fire suppression. Plus, I noticed that you said that when you had the slide of what's contracted out, the room separation is going to be done by employees of the district. Does that include the electrical? Because you build walls, you have to have electrical on it. So there's costs associated with that that still aren't presented at this time. Now I'm going to touch base on something else. Something the board, back in November 9th of 2015, this board approved $538,000 for Head Start because they were underfunded. They took $538,000, you did as a board, from the general fund to support Head Start. Head Start is a program that we have no guarantee that these students, because we live in a transient society, are going to stay in the district. It's a hope. We have no idea. These people here come to us and want a graduation diploma. This is something that's guaranteed. These are people that are in the city that are coming forward. So I ask, how much is it worth? We have a $115 million budget in this district. You're talking a couple $100,000 out of the budget to keep this going. I mean, you have to weigh this, and we as a community need to look at what we can cut and what we can do, but we've cut enough programs. We've closed enough schools. When does it stop? When we've asked our teachers for cuts. He's making way under what he should be as a teacher because he took cuts. The unions made concessions, but we as a district are looking at $200,000 about in savings overall. But $538,000 for Head Start, that has no guarantee. I'm just a little bit confused on how this is going to work. And I wish you guys would reconsider this. We don't have all the facts. I think another year may be in order. Maybe we can figure this out, graduate all these kids they're talking about, and then maybe we can not take any more kids in and gradually work it out instead of just pushing everybody out in the streets. Things to think about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, Laura Kalea. I guess I want to ask about a firmer plan about placement of the 5 full-time cheap teachers. No, okay. Is there anything that we have in place for that? I think the slide was a little talking about those who might not be displaced, but I know there's so much involved in this plan, but I was wondering if there is anything, I'm saying this, like in the position that I'm at, I'm not allowed to bid for certain jobs within the district, and no one has ever said, those ones that are part of the WWEA, go ahead, ace, and do that. So I'm wondering, would that be opened up? Because I know that there's public jobs, in other districts, but just as a, I don't know, courtesy, although I guess maybe that would be a union thing as well. But you know that we're not allowed to bid for the jobs that we get emails on regularly. So I was hoping that could change. And I forgot what else. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? All right, seeing nobody, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, 27516, Review and Recommendations, Board of Education. Mr. Bucklew.
Nothing at this time.
Mrs. Madison?
I don't have anything at this time.
Have nothing at this time.
Mrs. Hines?
I just have one question. It might sound really out of the water, but what about like Jefferson Burns? Could they have like maybe like some outside relationship with them to have like one adult ed class at Jefferson Burns for the classroom or something? I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's legal, if we can do that, because I mean, we're doing a lot of, like a lot of cities doing programs with them, different, opportunities maybe. I don't know. Maybe just one class. I don't know.
Dr. Weaver?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
And I don't have anything at this moment. So therefore, I will call for 27616 adjournment. I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Moved by Mr. Griffin, supported by Mrs. Hines. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are in adjournment.